Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Justin Wrench and I'll be chairing this meeting. Firstly, I'll go through a few items of housekeeping. So we are not expecting a fire alarm this evening, but should one sound, please can members use the exit to the rear of the chamber and assemble in the car park. And please can I ask you to make sure that all of your phones and other devices are switched to silent. If members wish to speak during our debates this evening, please can you indicate by raising your hand and I'll come to you at the appropriate time. And just to remind you that this meeting is being webcasted, so please can I remind you to switch on your microphones when you wish to speak and switch them off when you have finished speaking so that we avoid any interference. I will now proceed to the main business of the meeting. So agenda item 1 is apologies for absence, and we have had apologies this evening from Councillor Andy Monday. Have we had any other apologies?
No further apologies, thank you, Chairman, that we're aware of.
Thank you very much, Jessica. So as we don't have any more apologies at this time, I'll proceed to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. So do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests that they wish to declare this evening? And please state the item and the nature of your interest. Okay, thank you. There aren't any declarations this evening, so I will now proceed to agenda item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. So please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee held on the 14th of January 2026. Thank you, Councillor Hayes. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hooks. So the minutes have been moved and seconded as an accurate record. So all those in favour, please indicate by a show of hands. Okay, thank you. The minutes are approved. So I will now just sign those before we continue. Thank you very much. So we'll now move to agenda item 4, public question time. And members, I can confirm that there are no registered speakers this evening. So we'll now proceed to agenda item 5, which is the statement of accounts and external auditors draft final ISA 260, the audit completion reports for the financial year ended the 31st of March 2025. This report is set out on pages 5 to 54 of tonight's agenda. And firstly, I will invite Mark Jarvis, Financial Services Manager. Secondly, I will then move on to Emma Larkham, the Director at KPMG LLP, to present the reports this evening. But firstly, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this report is to approve the Council's Statement of Accounts for 24-25 financial year in light of the audited report. There is a link in the report for the draft Statement of Accounts. I wasn't going to cover much in terms of the report, because obviously the main report here is the KPMG audit findings. However, if I give some context of where we are and how we got to this position. So the Council had a statutory requirement to complete the Statement of Accounts by the 30th of June 2025, which consists of completion of all the core statements, subsequent notes, the annual governance statement, new accounting standards in relation to the treatment of leases, as well as the backdrop of the backstop arrangements. So obviously all that happened in 24-25. So 24-25 we also had to close off the 2021 accounts, 21-22, 21-22, 22-23 and 23-24, which obviously, although that was prior year, it had a knock-on impact in the preparation and actually completion of the 24-25 accounts. So there's been a whole lot of work in terms of what the finance teams had to undertake, as well as key officers around the council to meet the deadlines. We completed the Statement of Accounts by the 30th of June, and that was published on our website. And from the 1st of July, we launched a public inspection period for 6 weeks, of which we had no objections. The audit commenced through September into December, with a few minor questions continuing to the new year. And obviously the final step is to approve the final audited accounts following audit report which obviously has to be signed off before the 27th of February, which is saying this report aims to present. So I'm happy to take any questions in regards to the report or the statement of accounts before we move on to the report from our external auditors, KPMG. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do any members have any questions for Mark before we move on? Okay, thank you, Mark. Emma, would you like to present the report this evening? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got a couple of items on the agenda today. So the first one, as we just said, was the ISA 260 report. So this is our summary of all of the detailed audit work that we have concluded on the audit for this year. Before I dive into the detail of that report, I thought it was probably worth just pausing on page 6 of my report, which is 13 of the full pack, which is just in terms of where we are in relation to the rebuilding of assurance and the backstop date, and sort of the journey that we've been on over the last sort of 2 years. So just as a reminder, last year we issued a disclaimer opinion, but were able to complete a number of areas of work. What we've set out on page 6 of my report is essentially what we've been able to complete for the 24-25 year end, which the opinion will still remain a disclaimed audit opinion, but we have been able to complete a significant amount of work this year. So essentially near enough a full audit, other than in relation to property, plant and equipment and the associated accounts. So that means that we have been able to conclude over our significant risk areas on retirement obligations, around management override of controls, as well as looking at all of the in-year income and expenditure balances, and a significant portion of the balance sheet. So that's a real improvement and absolutely the first step in terms of the rebuilding of assurance that we need to go through. The next stage of that work, which will commence over the coming months, is around doing a look back over the disclaimed audit periods and identifying what work we need to do to be able to complete that build back assurance, hopefully over the next 12 months. So I just wanted to pause on that because that is, it's a good direction of travel and sort of, as I say, a very key step in terms of rebuilding assurance. So if we now just go on to the key audit findings for this year, what I've proposed to do is probably just pause on the following page, which is page 7 of my document, or page 14 of the full pack. On here we pull out sort of what we called and identified as the significant audit risk areas. So the first two you'll see there on the left are in relation to the valuation of lands and buildings and the valuation of investment properties. We were unable to conclude our procedures in relation to valuation. That's not to say we didn't do any work over the valuation piece. We did do quite a lot of work in terms of discussions with the valuation, but we did identify a number of challenges and questions essentially with that valuation process, using our internal experts and the discussions that we had with Braintree's valuation specialists. Because of the backstop date, we've been unable to conclude all of that work, so that is why that area remains unconcluded. But what it does mean is that we've been able to identify some challenges, and we're in discussions with the valuers to sort of move that forward over the next audit cycle. We were able to conclude all of our work in relation to management override of control, so a big part of that is around looking at journals. And this was something we didn't look at last year, so essentially understanding what journals have been posted throughout the year, looking at unusual combinations, and we were comfortable in relation that there was no sort of manipulation in terms of any of those figures, as well as looking at some of those key judgment areas. And the last sort of significant risk area that we've got there is around pensions, so the recognition of the sort of pensions liability that is seen, and we are comfortable that is recognised at the right position. So again, we've completed a good amount of work this year. We've had a couple of disclosure adjustments that we are expecting to have all been processed through in the final set of accounts in relation to pensions. I'll come on to the control points in a moment. And then just to touch on the couple of outstanding matters that we've just got there at the point that we issued this report. The key one was probably in relation to the conclusion of some testing in regards to income. We had a couple of samples we were pending. That has now concluded. We will have one adjustment coming through that, which I'm expecting will remain unadjusted, of sort of 100 or so thousand pounds there. The other points there will be concluded as part of the signing of the audit opinion. The next couple of pages I'll take as read, which sort of set out the work that we have been able to do over all of those key audit areas in a bit more detail. We're happy to have any questions. We'll come back to value for money in the next report, if that's all right, Chair. And then if we jump through to the appendices, so the key ones to draw out is probably page 33 of the main pack sets out our audit fees, and there are a number of fees there which are for variations for the audit this year, which will go through an approval process with the PSAA. The following pages confirms our auditor independence to you as a committee, and then we've got on page 37 the detail of that audit adjustment I've just mentioned in relation to some disclosures around pensions, but we are expecting that to be corrected in the very final version. And then we have listed a number of control deficiencies which management will provide us with some responses to. The main one I think is worth touching on is probably the first one there, which is rated as red, which is linked to the valuation reporting and some of the challenges we have had with the valuer in terms of getting a clear understanding of that process. So I will pause there on this report and take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Emma. Do any members wish to ask any questions? Councillor Prime, thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and enjoyable reading. It's nice to see a set of reports for the first time for a long time. Couple of things. The risk areas of property and plant. Are you expecting to catch up with that for this year's audit, or will it take a bit longer on to sort of bring it all up to date and get everything ready?
So Braintree do a full valuation of their property plant equipment each year, which is a real positive in terms of rebuilding assurance. So as long as we are able to get comfortable with the valuation process, which is what we've had a challenge with, so we've had some differences in sort of approach to that valuation basis, then yes, that would be one that I would expect for next year we would be able to conclude on. The key for us is really making sure we've got early engagement from both sides in terms of that work to conclude that quickly.
Can I just, one more question, and it's on page 44, 37 of your report, and it's just something that sort of caught my eye, and it's the sort of areas of focus, and it's the climate, and it's the TCFD. That's now been disbanded. Should that still be in them initials in the report?
So I think climate, I mean, these are our sort of...
It's something I'm quite passionate about, the climate area, and I just wondered what we would do. What is the audit you're looking at on that and the risk area? And of course that initials, are they still valid now because the particular department's been amalgamated into something else?
Yeah, that probably just needs updating in terms of the department. But in terms of climate in as itself, these are areas that we see from our regulators, so the FRC, that areas when they do their external inspections of audits, that these are the things that they are interested in. So climate disclosures is an area which the FRC is focused on, and clearly this is areas looking across public and private sector bodies. From a local government perspective, you know, SIPVA will sort of be a driver in terms of what needs to be disclosed. But I think it's always important with climate, if the council has made such statements, which therefore, you know, lead to commitments, we need to be careful about how they are disclosed, but also if there is any associated accounting related to that. So that's what I would be looking at. But at the moment, SIPVA is still relatively light in terms of the requirements to the climate.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dolkum.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Emma. I just wanted to ask about the valuations. Obviously, to put it in plain English language, there's a difference of opinion between the ones you use and the ones we've used. Is this something usual, or is it very unusual?
So I think there are a couple of points. There are some areas which are probably, with evaluation, there's a lot of estimation, there's a lot of judgment involved. So you will always get a range of sort of views. So we would never expect, for example, us to say absolutely we 100% agree with that number versus that number, because you put two values in a room, you'll get a different answer. Some of the challenges we've seen here around some of the base methodology that's been applied, where we would be challenging that to the valuer you've used. We don't necessarily, based on the information we've seen to date, agree with that approach, as in, is it fully compliant with what we would expect? So there are some challenges there on that piece, but we haven't really been able, because of time, to bottom all of that out, to work that through. What I will say is this is certainly not something that's isolated to Braintree. What we have seen as we've come back into the market is there are some challenges with the valuers across the local government sector. And I think that's just where often the valuers that are being used for local government are maybe of a smaller size. They don't have access to the same level of sort of large market data pools to be able to do some of the sort of market valuation data that we might expect to see. So there is a piece of work that we're looking at as to whether we can help support some of that valuation process in terms of providing some sort of what we look at from a valuation perspective when we're doing the audit. So if we can share that with management, then we will do. But I think there are two aspects of that. There's an element where we've got some just fundamental differences in terms of approach.
Hey, Chair.
Yep.
Thanks for that. And just following on then, would it be your suggestion that perhaps in future we use a different valuer, and or that they work in a different way?
So it's not for me to say in terms of who you should be appointing as a valuer. What I think it is important to recognise is where you have a portfolio of assets which are different. So you have assets which are valued on a market valuation, where having access to a wide level of sort of market data versus the more sort of straightforward valuation property, which is done maybe on a DRC basis. Then you might say I need two different valuers, because there's a different level of skill set and requirement that I need. So there's the same way that you would do with any specialist. You need to look at what your need is and then make sure you've got the appropriate support to be able to give that.
Councillor Hayes.
Just to build on that one, obviously you said you didn't have the time this year because maybe communication. Have we got a plan in place with the valuers then to build on this year, to actually, you said about if we to get it in the right time, because obviously you are under pressure to deliver this, but have we got that plan in position, or when would we likely start these conversations with the valuers to build this back to?
So we will get, obviously management will get a valuation report for the production of the accounts in the summer. We will, as soon as we've got that, we'll be able to start those conversations. I think what we have, however, got is based on the work that we've done so far this year, is identify areas of challenge. So what we can do as part of our planning procedures is go back to the valuer at that point and say, are you changing your valuation methodology because of these, and try and start to explore that earlier. But until we've got that sort of line in the sand of numbers, it's difficult to do too much work. But I think it would be important to start those conversations in the summer. I think the point around the challenge and the timeline is these are not quick conversations, and there's a lot of often revision and recalculation that is required in some of these questions that we are asking. So therefore we need enough time for your valuer to go and respond to that, but also for us then to have to audit it. And unfortunately the backstop in this situation has just sort of crept up too quickly for us to be able to conclude that this year.
I'll ask a question if I may. So if you remain still unsatisfied with the valuer's responses, what would you then be looking to do? And I suppose this may be a question also then to the officers. what would be our plan if the external auditors aren't convinced that the responses they're getting from our current valuers? Or I suppose, are we hoping for a resolution between the two?
So on a hypothetical basis, obviously. So if we were for next year, you would have a number of options. One would be either continue to be considered a pervasive issue and therefore would be a disclaimer again. If we were comfortable it was only a valuation issue and we were able to sort of just be happy with that, we might be able to move to a qualified opinion. If we were able to quantify the difference, we might be able to pull it out as this is the value of which we think there is a difference, and it would be reported as an error.
Okay.
And depending on the size of that error would depend on the impact on the opinion of
Okay.
that. I would hope we will be able to work through it to reach a resolution which doesn't end in any of those.
Yeah, it's, well, I think that's where we will be. I think it's fair to say some of the challenges that Emma referred to, I think there had already been some, I suppose, some correspondence back from valuers in responding to those. But as was mentioned, the sort of the backstop date and the need to sort of draw a line under it has not really been able to allow that matter to sort of progress. So I think, I think we're sort of minded, as Emma said, sort of working jointly on trying to get to that resolved position, really. So,
Okay. No, thank you. Any other members wish to ask any questions on this agenda item? So members, there are 4 things that we're asked to do this evening. So the first one is to receive and note the external auditor's draft final year end report for the year ended the 31st of March 2025, and that is attached as Appendix A. We're also, secondly, asked to note the letter of representation to be issued by the Section 151 officer in the form of attached in our pack tonight as Appendix B, subject to the final audit report. Our third thing that we're asked to do is to approve the statement of accounts for the 2024-25, subject to any amendments identified during the final stages of the completion of the external audits by KPMG. And finally, we are asked to delegate authority to the Section 151 officer to agree and make amendments proposed by KPMG to the final accounts. So please can I have a proposer to move the recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Prime. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Was the case? Is that okay? Thank you. Sorry, I thought I saw double hands going up there, but so thank you. So the members, the recommendation have been moved and seconded. I'll now put this to the vote. So all those in favour, please indicate by show of hands. And thank you, members. That is unanimous. So the recommendations have been approved. So we'll now proceed to agenda item 6, the external auditor's draft annual report for the financial year ended the 31st of March 2025. So this report is set out on pages 55 to 74 of tonight's agenda. And can I please invite Emma Larkham, Director of KPMG, to present this report. And we also have Mark Twyford here tonight this evening as well, who may be able to add to some of our discussions. So over to you, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to hand over to Mark to do this one.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'll do this one then. So probably a bit of deja vu on this one because I think we have probably largely already talked through this one in substance. There hasn't been any significant change in the auditor's annual report, you'll be pleased to hear, so I will just run through again the key highlights from the report, which I'll draw your attention to. So I think first and foremost, if I draw your attention to page 11 of our report, which talks through whether we have identified any significant risks or any significant weaknesses in regards to the value for money arrangements at the council. So in 2023-24, you may recall that we did raise some significant risks within our VFM findings, but we did not find any significant weaknesses. So these were in regard to a couple of areas. So one of them was around the management of the Wethersfield process, so the legal consultation was undertaken there and the governance processes that were followed. The other one was in regards to contract management at the council and review of ongoing key commercial contracts. We carried out our work in the prior year. We were satisfied that neither of those resulted in a significant weakness, and we have continued, well, as part of our procedures this year, we've obviously followed up on that, and we have concluded this year that we're in a sufficient place that there isn't actually a significant risk in the first place in regard to those two areas. The other two things I would then draw your attention to, and these are also reported in the ISA, but we have two recommendations to raise, and these are kind of best practice recommendations, but not significant findings in regard to the value for money at the council. So the first one is in regard to governance arrangements on policies. So we did note in the prior year that there are a number of key policies at the council that we would expect to be updated slightly more regularly, and that this, as part of that, there's also kind of a version control to put in place on those policies so that that's kind of more effectively maintained. We have noted that there has been some improvement this year, so there have been a number of policies as part of that recommendation that have been actioned. There are still some policies that we have noted, for example, the complaints policy, the disciplinary policy, where there's updates yet to be carried out. Obviously, we've carried out our inquiries with the finance team. That's very much on the radar. So we're just noting the progress there and that continues to be a recommendation while those updates are to be made. The second one, and this is really in regard to improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness, is in regard to resourcing. And again, we have discussed this with management, and I think it's key to say that while we've raised this as a best practice recommendation in the ISA, we do currently think that the council has a sufficient response to this matter. We're raising it as there is a potential for there to be a risk around this in the future, and that's in regard to resourcing. So we noted from our inquiries as we were doing our VFM procedures that there are a number of service lines in the council where there are perhaps some recruitment issues in regards to getting permanent staffing in. So say, for example, housing officers, I think, and from our inquiries at the time, it was noted that that can be a difficult area to attract people in. It can be quite a stressful job, and it's difficult getting people from the market at the moment. There are policies in place to mitigate this. Where appropriate, the council is using agency staffing. And I think first and foremost, it is important to note that this is on the risk register. So the strategic risk register of the council, it's been assigned an appropriate risk and it is being managed from a risk point of view. Obviously, if that was not in place, we would be more concerned about it. So we're raising it as a something, I suppose, to be aware of, which the council is, and that that is best practice. But I think our findings on that are that more a recommendation that continue to monitor that, continue to include that on the risk register. It can be a risk to councils, and we have seen that across other areas of the sector where those staffing levels can get more critical, that can have a significant financial impact on councils. Not the case at Braintree currently, but obviously want to keep on the radar. Really, that is some of our findings in regards to VFM this year. Apart from that, it's a pretty good picture in regards to the value for money governance. So I'll open that up to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. Members, any questions this evening? No, as you said, we have got one. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. There's one down bottom here about ongoing consideration of a new contract with LGR. Probably maybe for the officers. Are we expecting if we're renewing contracts, obviously you're looking at pretty shorter term contracts more than longer term because of the LGR. Are we expecting a higher cost to that because usually longer term?
Yes, so it's a really good question. Actually, what we wouldn't be doing is looking to limit all our contracts to end before the vesting day of the new authority, because the last thing the new authority would need would be to run a load of procurements and have no contracts in place on their first day. So we're in a process at the moment whereby we are still going through our procurement in the same way as we always would as a sovereign council. And certainly, as you say, restricting the timeline of those might actually not constitute value for money, and we absolutely can't do that at the moment. What we're doing is capturing our rationale for entering those contracts over that period of time, and we're also sharing that information with partners. As we move towards the Minded to decision next month, when we know for sure who our partners will be, then we absolutely will start circulating all that information around. So everyone, it's almost like we're kind of building the organisational knowledge of an organisation that's yet to exist. Then following the structural changes order coming into force, we understand that Secretary of State is minded to issue a Section 24 directive, which actually is a lot of words to basically say that we'll need to get approval from the Shadow Authority as well as Cabinet or the equivalent here for the award of any contract. So that there'll kind of be a twin tracking. So yeah, it will be there's kind of a lot of extra work that we'll need to do on contracts over the next couple of years, but we're quite mindful of making sure that it's the best for the current predecessor councils and the successor councils as they come.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, thank you, Suzanne. Any other questions, members? Okay, thank you. So, as there aren't any other questions, we're asked to receive and note the External Auditor's Draft Annual Report for the financial year ended the 31st of March 2025. So please can I take it that the report has been noted by a show of hands? Thank you, members. The report has been noted. So, as we have no urgent business this evening, this item concludes our business for this evening. And please note that the next meeting of the committee is due to be held on the 22nd of April this year. So we'll therefore close the meeting of Governance and Audit Committee at 7:46. And thank you, members, for your attendance this evening, and to those watching via the YouTube broadcasts. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.